more mishaps. Thalidomide use of the 1950s and 60s. Thalidomide was introduced in 1953 as a tranquilizer and was later marketed as an anxiety medication, also good for trouble sleeping, tension, and morning sickness. It was introduced as a sedative and medication for morning sickness without ever having been tested on pregnant women. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, the use of thalidomide in 46 countries by women who were pregnant or who subsequently became pregnant resulted in a huge medical disaster, with more than 10,000 children born with a range of severe deformities such as phocomelia, as well as thousands of miscarriages. While initially deemed to be safe in pregnancy, concerns regarding birth defects were noted as early as 1961, and then it was removed from the market in Europe later that year. Operation Crossroads in the Bikini Atoll. Between 1946 and 1958, the United States detonated 23 nuclear devices at Bikini Atoll, including 20 hydrogen bombs. The tests displaced the local population and contaminated the island with little consideration for long-term environmental or human impacts of radiation exposure. When the inhabitants were relocated in 1946, they were promised they would be able to return. Starting in the late 1960s, the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission declared Bikini Atoll finally safe for human habitation, and people started to return. That experiment was cut short a decade later when a study showed that levels of cesium-137, a radioactive isotope, in the returnees' bodies had increased 75%. The inhabitants were once again relocated, and scientists say it is still to this day not safe to return. Biological warfare testing in the UK started in 1916, but we're going to focus on the 1950s. The UK government conducted over 750 tests, often without the public's knowledge or consent. They released zinc-cadmium sulfide over civilian populations to simulate a biological attack and see how the agents would spread in urban environments. Long-term or repeated exposure to zinc-cadmium sulfide are expected to have harmful effects on the kidneys, bones, and respiratory tract, resulting in kidney impairment, osteoporosis, and chronic inflammation of the respiratory tract. Bacillus globigi is a bacteria also used in the experiments to simulate the dispersal of a more dangerous organism. BG, as we're going to call it, is a known cause of food poisoning, resulting in diarrhea and vomiting. Infections are rarely known to be fatal, although fatal food poisoning has been reported. The Cincinnati radiation experiments, 1960 to 1971. The United States government funded experiments in which over 80 cancer patients, the majority of whom were poor, black, and terminally ill, were subjected to high doses of radiation without fully understanding the risks. Many of the participants were not properly informed that the radiation they were receiving was not intended to treat their cancer, but it was to observe the effects of radiation exposure. The stated purpose was to understand how large doses of whole-body radiation affected humans for both medical and military purposes. The doses ranged from 100 to 300 rads, far exceeding therapeutic levels, leading to severe side effects such as nausea, vomiting, severe pain, and in some cases death. The radiation caused damage to healthy tissue, and there was no significant therapeutic benefits to the patient's cancer treatments. The Soviet biopreparat program, 1950s to 1990s. The Soviet Union ran a secret biological weapons program called biopreparat, which involved developing and testing various bioweapons like anthrax and smallpox. Despite signing the Biological Weapons Convention, BWC, in 1972, which banned the development and use of biological weapons, the Soviet Union covertly expanded its biological warfare capabilities under this program. Accidents at these facilities led to civilian exposure. Poor safety measures, secrecy, and lack of international oversight led to several deadly outbreaks, including a 1979 anthrax leak that led to the deaths of at least 66 people. Initially, the Soviet government blamed tainted meat for the outbreak, but after the collapse of the Soviet Union, it was confirmed that the cause was an accidental release from a military facility.